About 100 years ago, there was a book that was published that was so powerful that prominent elites tried to have it erased from history because they were afraid of the public gaining access to these reality creation and success principles that were contained in this book. They even forced a sanitized version of the book to be released to the public in order to distract them away from the real secrets. And yet it was the information and wisdom that was kept suppressed in the original that contained the real winning formula, which I'm going to reveal to you in this video today. Now, funnily enough, this sanitized version of the book that was released later, about 10 years later, actually went on to become one of the most popular and best-selling books in the self-development space. You've probably heard of this book. It is called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That's right. Think and Grow Rich is actually an elites approved version of a book that came before it that was even more powerful. The original book was published almost a decade before Think and Grow Rich and contained some of the best 1% secrets that the elites didn't want to get out there, to such a point that they had it suppressed and removed off the bookshelves. Now, there was actually one of the most prominent elites at the time who was most angry at this book being released and was the main advocate for pulling it from the shelves. And this was none other than Henry Ford. Now, Ford was of the belief that the information contained in this book and the information that's shared in things like secret societies and with the top 1% of people should not be shared with the public and should only remain with the few. And there are many of those in the so-called elites or in these secret societies back then and still today that believe this should be the case, that certain information, systems, protocols should not be shared with the public and should only remain with the few, while you give a watered down version or something that kind of gives you some of the formula but not all of it to the public. On the other hand, Andrew Carnegie, who commissioned Napoleon Hill to go out and study the most successful people of the time, believed that this information should not be hidden from view. He believed the secrets of success, of creating your own reality, should be available to all of those who seek it out and wish to learn it. As a self-made man himself who grew up in poverty, came over from Scotland with immigrant parents, and then became the wealthiest man in the world, he knew the power of these principles, but also wanted to make it available to, again, anyone who sought it out. And so you now find yourself on this video with the ability to access this wisdom and apply it in your life, something that 100 years ago and even more recently you would probably not have been able to access this easily or at all unless you had some way or someone who knew about it and gave it to you or presented to you in some way. So let's go over what this wisdom is, this system is that has enriched so many people's lives that have applied it. Again, a very small percentage who have had access to it, whether it's elite businessmen, athletes, people that are atop of the industry, or just living successful lives on their terms. Let's jump into, again, what this book is and what's contained in it. Now, before we move into all of the principles that are contained in this book, that again, some of the most successful people had access to, but wasn't given to the public, I want to give you a warning about how you approach this information. Now, before we even start that warning, I'm going to tell you what the book is. And this book came out in, I believe, 1928, but was first written and kind of given to some people in 1925 by Napoleon Hill. And it is this book right here. And it's The Law of Success in 15 Lessons. And if you read the whole thing, the Master Wealth Builder's Complete and Original Lesson Plan for Achieving Your Dreams. This is the original book that would later become watered down to become Think and Grow Rich after growing pressure from people like Henry Ford, who didn't want this complete version. You can see it's a pretty thick book getting out there. Now, there's a book, another version of this book that I'm actually getting. That's the original kind of manuscripts of the book that has even more information, but that is the actual book. This is a reprint of the book. It has since obviously returned to the shelves later, but a lot of people haven't heard of this book because of kind of the negative fanfare or it being pulled off the shelf and being suppressed. Yet everyone has heard of the watered down version, Think and Grow Rich, which has helped many people, to be fair. Now, here's the warning I want to give you, because I'm going to go through each of the principles that are contained in this book, and I highly recommend you get it yourself if you want to explore them further. But Napoleon Hill in the Napoleon Hill archives, that was never really released to the public, but some people have had a chance to listen to, there is a talk he gave to some prominent elites at the time after Napoleon Hill gained some notoriety. He had released these books, and he was more in the public eye. I believe a question or something was asked of him, we're worried about this information getting out and everything, the things that a lot of them were worried about because they didn't want competition, they didn't want other people learning these. And Napoleon Hill, although trying to spread information, obviously through his books and everything else, gave them a message basically to put them at ease that I want you to take on board and pay attention to and really consider, because this is why a lot of people aren't successful even when they're given the right information. And he told these people that it's not that the information is out that they don't need to worry, but he said that most people will come across the information and actually dismiss it. He realized that when most people were exposed to the information, they didn't apply it. And this is because those who grew up in environments that didn't have a lot of success around them and everything else, they started creating beliefs around what creates success, what success looks like, and so much more. All of them pretty much untrue. And the belief a lot of the time was it's very complex. You have to do a million different things. Like you have to be very, very smart. And none of that's true at all. The fact of the matter is it's actually a very simple recipe. And that by sticking to the simple recipe without wasting time and energy on extravagances or distractions is what brings success. Essentially what Napoleon Hill told to these, again, so-called elites or more successful people who were worried about, everyone doing it and then therefore being their competition, he said that you don't have to worry because most people will dismiss it because they'll think it's too simple and think that it has to be something more, or that they're being lied to about these things working. And so because of that, will not actually go out and do it long enough to reap the benefits of these principles. So you may go through the principles we are about to cover and have a thought come up that's something like this: it can't be that simple, but I guarantee it is. Reality creation isn't complex. That is actually one of the great secrets. It is simply engaging and applying proven principles again and again and maintaining your focus, which we're going to cover in these principles. So I urge you to be open and kind of remove any preconceived notions you have about what allows someone to be successful. I also encourage you to take notes, absorb this, go through it a few times, because the more you do that, again, exposing yourself to these principles and applying them, the more successful you're going to be with all this. Also, I have provided you a summary of all of the principles that we're going to cover in this video, which you can download for free down below. Just look for whichever link says download the summary or something similar. And what I recommend you do is either follow through as you're going through this video to go through these. You could even print it out. I've left some room for you to take notes, ahas, and insights in there as well. And it's going to help you absorb these powerful principles even more effectively. So that is a resource down below that you can utilize if you would like. Now let's jump into the first principle. Now, the first principle is one you'll be familiar with if you've read Think and Grow Rich. Some of them are going to be the same. Some were still kept in Think and Grow Rich. And this is a big one. And this is a big one, again, that's so simple, but very few apply it, and it is called the mastermind principle. Now, I'm going to briefly discuss each of these principles as we go through them, so this video isn't like 16 hours long. But again, you can dive further into each of these, see which one resonates, buy the book if you want to keep going as you explore these further. I mean, all of these principles could be studied continuously for a lifetime to get better and better at each of them, and they will yield you benefits the more that you study them. Now, a mastermind is when more than one person comes together with a common goal, common beliefs, or something similar, and they're all coming together to work together to move something in a particular direction, right? It's kind of the idea of two heads being better than one. Now imagine 3, 4, and 5, and when you do this with a common goal, a common theme, it allows the energy of whatever it is you're doing to exponentially grow. This is like, for example, if you hear the idea that if you hang around with 5 negative people, you'll become the 6th. Well, why is that? Is because a mastermind has developed around that negative energy, whatever the thing is, and now that energy is very powerful in the room when these 5 people hang out. So even if you're the most positive person in the world and you go into that room, it's going to be quite difficult to coexist in that because there's an almost negative mastermind that has been developed. But this can go the other way as well. For example, if you're in the room with 5 incredibly successful people, let's say 5 millionaires or 5 business owners who are doing really well, etc., the combined kind of mental and spiritual power of all those people exponentially helps the energy of that group so that even more ideas come through, more breakthroughs happen. Essentially, you're able to tune in and connect to this energy, which is much more than you could do by yourself. And so this is an incredibly powerful principle in order to get around people who have the same goals, have the same ambition, same beliefs can help as well, the same mentality, mindset, and everything else, because it will expand your growth like none other. And although this is the first principle, it's one of the most crucial in my eyes, because again, if you go alone, even in trying to create your own reality, it becomes very difficult to move through the obstacles you need to move through, to continually gain motivation. But if you have a group of 5, 10, 15 or more people who are all aiming to do that and are doing that, just by being in that group, tuning into that, you're going to get an energetic boost, which is going to help you on your journey. And again, the more people you add, the more exponentially this grows. So having a mastermind around whatever it is you're trying to do is crucial and one of the most important success components. Now, if you want one that I've developed that can be incredibly beneficial for you, I just created a community that does exactly that, which you can find more about in the description down below, where you'll be able to join a bunch of people who are incredibly positive, creating their reality, getting results all the time. You'll be able to ask me questions and other things as well to amplify you in your dreams and in what you're trying to create. So you can check that out down below if you're interested. But whether you do that or not and want a proven one, you need to find something in my eyes, because again, if you just go on your own, you're leaving a lot on the table that you're just not going to be able to get to unless you have other people, other minds that are moving in the same direction as you. Principle number 2 is another crucial one, and this is called the definite chief aim. And this is something that across the board, pretty much everyone who is successfully manifesting and creating their reality has. And this is what Napoleon Hill observed when he was studying some of the most successful people. Is a lot of people, again, when it comes to success principles, they think that people who are successful, whether it's making a lot of money, living a fulfilled life, whatever the thing is, they believe these people are juggling all of these plates, like they're doing a million things. They have 18 businesses and they're the ones running it. They're doing all of these things. Their schedule is packed. Well, Andrew Carnegie, for example, just to use him as a case study, he was the richest man in the world moving into the 20th century, and he used to take 3 months off every single year in the summer to go on vacation to Scotland to visit family. He was basically no contact at that time. Do not contact me, do not bother me. This is just time for me to go enjoy my family and that life. He used to go to work at about 10 a.m., I think, and come back at 4, and he had a long lunch break as well. This guy was not breaking his back. He was not hustling and grinding because he understood the principles that you're going to learn today. And the DCA is a crucial one. It just stands for definite chief aim, meaning you have a singular definite chief aim that you are focusing on and moving towards rapidly, rather than focusing on all of these other things that really aren't as important. It's like you're focused on that one thing you know is going to move the needle forward most of all. Now, there's more information. We can go into this, like you need a sweet spot. Your mind and heart both bought into the DCA, but you can think of it like this: having a DCA versus not having a DCA. Not having a DCA is kind of like a light bulb level of energy, where you have all of these things you're trying to grow in your life, and so there's this light bulb that's illuminating and putting energy on all of them. But a light bulb isn't that powerful. It doesn't give much energy. And so there's light on all of these different things, but none of them are really expanding or growing because there's not enough power behind them. Now let's flip it to a DCA. A DCA is like putting a laser beam level of energy on a singular thing. And so yes, the other things are not being illuminated, but if you were to really think about them, they're probably distractions. And this laser-like focus is now on this DCA, and that energy is so powerful that the DCA starts to expand incredibly quick. Napoleon Hill is even stated as saying that when he applied this one specifically, the DCA, and he started using it in his own life, it worked so quickly that it frightened him. He actually was blown away by how quickly this began to work. Now, I have some videos on this channel which will help you to learn more about the DCA. It's something we do in the community and in my programs. We help people really clarify what that is for them, get their dreams, DCA objectives and things lined up, because you want to have that laser beam-like focus, not that light bulb-like focus that never really grows anything in your life. But this is a crucial one. If you're, going out there with no aim, no DCA, and you're just kind of like a paper boat being thrown around by the ocean with no direction, it's going to be very, very hard, damn near impossible to create what you want in your life. Now, the next one is self-confidence, principle number 3 in this book. Now, self-confidence, obviously, we know is very crucial to being successful. And I'm going to go over some of the things that Napoleon Hill said about this and again observed from some of the most successful successful people at the time. And Napoleon Hill goes on to say that fear is the biggest killer of confidence. So people have fear of poverty, for example, fear of illness, etc., etc. Other things, for example, fear of criticism, loss of love, old age, and death. And these are the main destroyers of confidence. And so we want to learn how to eradicate those fears. Now, he talks about how one of the ways to eradicate those fears, and one of the most effective, is to learn that self-confidence is a state of mind and to replace fear with faith in ourselves. So by replacing that fear with faith in ourselves and our abilities, it allows us to pull out kind of the fear weeds in your garden and plant the self-confidence seeds you're looking to plant. And I'll go over a little bit of how you can do that. Now, before moving on to what Napoleon Hill says exactly in this chapter about that, one thing that will help you with that is achieving your DCAs. And the proper way to achieve your DCAs is you aim for something you know you can hit, but you're also excited about, because it gives you wins. And nothing will improve your confidence more than having wins under your belt. So just keep that in mind when you're forming a DCA. Even if it seems small, so long as it's exciting, you can go for it. And when you hit that, your confidence improves. And then more and more and more. And when you have the momentum of many wins under your belt, your confidence goes through the roof. Napoleon Hill then goes on to talk about auto-suggestion, how you want to basically repeat certain things to yourself, almost like a formula or a code you'll encode yourself with in order to have better confidence in yourself. And he even gives an actual formula, which I'll tell you what, I will put it in the comments down below. So look at the pinned comments, and I will put the formula that Napoleon Hill recommends. So you can just have it, you can copy and paste it and put it where you want. And to say this to yourself often, you almost want to allow it to just seep into your mind so that when you kind of think about things like this, you can just automatically go to that. Keep in mind when you do this, you want to read it aloud with emotion. That is very important. If you read it aloud like this, then you're going like this and you're just saying it like this, it's not going to do anything. But if you're getting into it, you're bringing the emotional side of yourself into it, it allows it to go into your subconscious mind and become more of a belief. Now, a couple other things I'm going to give you that Napoleon Hill mentions with this is you need to have preparation and knowledge, which is going to improve your confidence tenfold. He states that confidence grows from competence, knowing your subject and being prepared, and then of course taking initiative. You know, there's the famous saying that if you're not prepared, be prepared to fail if you're not prepared to win, or something along those lines. I'm butchering that. But essentially, when you're not prepared and you're going through things winging it and you're not giving your energy to the things you're trying to succeed in, well, then of course you're not going to be confident. But that can be fixed by improving your competence, by being prepared, and of course taking initiative, which brings us into the final thing where Napoleon Hill says action will kill fear. He says essentially working on your plan is going to breed more confidence than waiting for yourself to be ready. A lot of people are waiting for what seems like the perfect moment to feel ready to go after their dreams or their DCA or whatever else. But I guarantee if you wait a week from now, you're still not going to feel ready. 6 months from now, you're not going to feel ready. 5 years from now, you're not going to feel ready. There is no perfect moment. There's another great saying where it says the perfect time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. The next perfect moment is right now. The more you delay, the more you stop yourself from actually taking action, the more your confidence is actually going to be hit. But you can start building that confidence by just being okay with taking imperfect action at first and following your plan. When you have the DCA, there will be certain actions that will come up to how you can hit that DCA, and then just start taking them. Don't worry about feeling ready or whatever else. Again, if you want to become the person you need to be successful, you can't act from the same behaviors of the person you've been leading up to now, because that's what's gotten you to where you are now. If you want to get further, you have to start taking the actions of that person right now, not later. Now, changing themes just slightly, Napoleon Hill also talks about finances and the habit of saving. And he mentions how a lot of successful people, they're really good with money. Who would have thought it? And they're really good with what's called the habit of saving. I'm going to give you a few little bits of advice that he gives here that can help you with this too. Now, one of the best bits of advice I ever got when it comes to saving and kind of comes to finances is a lot of people hear the advice that you need to live within your means. And this is not great advice. Because when you're living within your means, you're kind of in that paycheck to paycheck realm. You always need to live below your means. You always need to make sure that you're not just breaking even or whatever else. There's not much to work with there, but always below your means. And a lot of people are getting a house that's at their means. They're getting a car that's at their means. They're getting into debt. They're doing all these different things. And a lot of people need to sacrifice in the meantime to get below their means and then build from there. And that's also going to breed more confidence. Again, removing the fear of of poverty, fear of loss, fear of missing out, whatever else it is, and allow you to actually build something. Napoleon Hill says that every fortune begins with the ability to put some money aside. And it doesn't matter how small, but just having a percentage that you put to the side every time some comes in. He also talks about how saving builds self-discipline, which is crucial if you want to be successful. It builds character, restraint, and foresight, training the mind to think in terms of accumulation rather than always spending. He also mentions that a person with savings starts to gain more freedom from fear, greater bargaining power, and the ability to seize opportunities. For example, if an amazing opportunity comes your way that you're feeling guided to take on, and you have the savings to pursue it, well then you suddenly might get a huge jump ahead, where if you're always living within your means and not much of an expendable income, then you're never going to be able to do that. And again, Napoleon Hill talks about how the act of saving money isn't just about the money itself, which will help in that area, but also the mental training and discipline that this builds. This will help you develop a mental attitude that creates confidence, stability, and the ability to control one's destiny. To kind of relate this to something else, there's a book called The Richest Man in Babylon, which I recommend everyone pick up. It's a very short book made of essentially short stories to keep it very engaging and entertaining while it gives you these amazing money habits. And one of the money habits in there is kind of putting a certain percentage aside every time income comes in. I believe this is 10%. You can also increase and decrease this. Essentially, it's 10% for yourself, 2% for anything that you owe, so if you have debts or anything you need to pay off, and then the rest, and when I say 20%, 10%, and then 70% is for your expenses, is for your living, is for the things that you need. This keeps you below your means. You're always putting money aside, and then if you do have debts or things you need to pay off, that 20% will start chipping away at that until that becomes something that no longer exists, and then that 20% can be merged into the 10% or used for something else. Now the next principle is another big one. I mean, all of these together are pretty big, but this is one I really love as well. It's called initiative and leadership. Now the way Napoleon Hill defines initiative is doing what needs to be done without being asked. Napoleon Hill stresses that successful people act of their own volition rather than needing someone to tell them what to do all the time. He also says that true leadership equals influencing others willingly in the sense of inspiring cooperation, loyalty, and effort, not by force, but through vision and example. One way I love this, one way this is told that I love, is being the invitation and example. It's kind of the difference between being a leader versus a boss. A boss just tells people what to do. A leader shows people what to do, right? It's through their example and invitation that people are inspired to gather around them and trust them to take them forward, right? Leaders also have courage and decisiveness. They're not afraid to make decisions and take on the responsibility of those decisions. They don't look to push blame onto anyone else. They are willing to take the responsibility for the actions. One of the other things Napoleon mentions when it comes to this is they value creation over imitation. Initiative means creating opportunities, not waiting for them. Leadership means charting a course rather than following one. And of course, he talks about failure being a part of leadership and not to fear it, right? Failure is not something to be afraid of. In fact, there are so much to gain from failure. And I've seen this in my own life, again, with my clients and everyone else, not to be afraid of what we call the storms, because that feedback will prove invaluable, will prove to be just amazing for you moving forward, and will provide you with the information you need to be even more successful in the future. And so take the actions, take the initiative, and don't be afraid that there might be some what we call failures. But in reality, they're not failures. It's just more data and information and feedback that's going to help you moving forward. The next principle mentioned is imagination. And this is another big one because if you've been following this channel for a while, we talk about the idea of the outer world following the inner world. Well, imagination is a faculty of the inner world. What you can see in here, you'll be able to see reflected in your outer world. So this is a crucial one and a big part of the DCA and other things that Napoleon Hill talks about. Napoleon Hill goes on to say that the imagination is the workshop of the mind, calling it the place where desires, ideas, and plans are shaped before they become physical reality. He talks essentially about two different types of imagination, synthetic imagination and creative imagination. Now think of synthetic imagination of taking the concepts, ideas, and everything else that you already have and shaping them to be this more kind of coherent thing that's going to benefit you. And creative imagination is more bringing in things like intuition and hunches and things beyond the mind that then can come in, more data that comes in, that your synthetic imagination then can play with. with. Now, one way I love to describe this, and I've heard this described, is to think of your life as having these Lego blocks in your life. So imagine everything in your life that's physical is a Lego brick, right? And so everything that's already here, you can, through the synthetic imagination, be able to piece those things together to create something new. So there's all these building blocks, and you can take what's already in the known and piece them together to create something new, to be creative in that sense. However, if we want new bricks, if we want new information, if we want new material to play with, we need to go into the Lego factory, which is the creative imagination, and order new bricks. We need to tune into our hunches, our intuition, so that new bricks and different special orders of these bricks can come into our life that our synthetic imagination can then take and again mold that these bricks are here. And so it is the combination of these two that is going to provide you with so many results, or provide you with what you need to create what you want. These two working in tandem. Again, working with the known through the synthetic imagination and working with the unknown with the creative imagination, bring things that are off your radar from outside the radar in. And Napoleon Hill mentions that the greatest leaders, the greatest business owners, the greatest inventors use their imagination to become successful, and all were really good at using it. And as a key takeaway here, Napoleon Hill says essentially that imagination is the bridge between desire and reality. And without it, definite chief aims cannot take form or find expression in your physical world. Again, this is one that I find to be so important, that we give our clients a very intentional visualization, which activates the imagination visualization technique that essentially uses both synthetic and creative imagination. And I basically train them how to do this every day to bring what they want, their DCAs, into their life faster, because it really is that important. Remember that the outer world, so the physical world, follows the inner. So the more that in the inner world you are kind of using the imagination and you are putting that energy on your desire, your DCA, the faster things will start to solidify or come about in your physical. Okay, so principle number 7 is simply enthusiasm. Now, the way Napoleon Hill describes this is enthusiasm is faith in action. It's an energy that animates ideas, it influences others, and it sustains effort. Enthusiasm, building up this energy, is something that happens from within the inner world, which again is creating the outer. And so if you cannot build up enthusiasm, kind of generate energy towards the thing, your DCA that you're trying to create, well, you never get what's called enough particle flow to actually create it. And so you need enthusiasm. You should be that person who's incredibly excited about what you do. Remember what I said about the DCA, it should both excite you and be able to be bought in by the mind. But if you don't have that excitement part of it, it all falls apart. It's like having a car where you want to get to a certain destination, which is your DCA, and let's say the mind buying in is the steering wheel, so it moves and points in the direction you want to go. Okay, you're pointing in that direction, but it's enthusiasm, it's excitement that is the gasoline in the tank. And if you don't have any of that, you could be pointing in the right direction all you want. You could have a ship that has a destination and it's pointing in the right direction, but if there's no fuel in the tank, you can never get going. And if you keep losing fuel in the tank and you don't replenish it through enthusiasm, again, you could be a little bit there and then just get stuck. Now, not only for that reason, enthusiasm also becomes contagious, which attracts people around you, attracts cooperation. I mean, if you really think about it, especially when you're in a positive place, do you want to work with someone who is unenthusiastic and kind of not excited about anything, or do you want to work with someone who's incredibly enthusiastic and positive and has just got so much energy, brimming with energy, kind of lifts your energy up? Which person do you want to work with? Which person do you believe attracts people to them to cooperate and co-create? It also, like I mentioned, becomes a fuel for persistence. So even when things seem to not be working out, the storm hits you, some chaos comes up, the enthusiasm allows you to continually still feel good and be excited about what you're doing, understanding, again, there'll be some failure along the way, there'll be some bumps in the road, and that's perfectly okay. I'm still excited about this, I still have enthusiasm, I still have fuel in the tank, and so there's a storm, let's drive through it, we'll be fine. Now, one thing that Napoleon Hill does warn about when it comes to enthusiasm is it needs to be sincere. He really warns against false enthusiasm, which is kind of forced or manipulative, that kind of a version of enthusiasm, which also repels people, while true enthusiasm comes from belief in one's purpose. This is why it's so crucial to get your DCA right to get all of that lined up, because if it's not congruent, if it's not lined up, it comes across as false enthusiasm. It's kind of the same thing as false positivity, when someone tries to present themselves as positive, but you know in the background they're not at all. And again, they have the right idea because they want to be positive, they want to be enthusiastic, but they haven't done the things in the background to actually cultivate that genuine, authentic positivity or enthusiasm. So when going to do this, you can't just talk to yourself, I'm enthusiastic, I'm excited, or whatever else, although you can certainly speak to yourself in a way to enhance that. But you want to get the foundation right. Your DCA being aligned and building the habits that will allow you to actually genuinely and authentically be enthusiastic. So to kind of put this together in one takeaway, enthusiasm is the emotional spark that transforms knowledge and plans into irresistible, influential action. This can build so much momentum for you as you pursue what it is you're aiming to pursue. Okay, so number 8 is a big one, because if you don't have this one, even if you have the rest, it's going to lead you down some troubling paths, and that is self-control. Napoleon Hill talks about how mastery over self precedes mastery over circumstance. You have to learn how to govern your own thoughts, your own feelings, and your own actions. Without that, you cannot direct outer success. And again, something I talk about all of the time is you get what you think about most of the time. Again, what I said earlier, the outer world follows the inner. You cannot hope to alter outer circumstances in your life, the outer world, if your inner discipline, if your inner control is all over the place, if your thoughts are thinking about a million different things that are not related to what you're trying to do, if you're incredibly negative, if you're feeling bad all the time, if your actions are kind of counter to where you're trying to go. Again, this is not magic. It's like for like. It is putting yourself on a frequency where these things exist. But to put yourself on that frequency, you have to think, feel, and act in a way that puts you on that frequency, that aligns you with that frequency. And so it is so important to have that self-control of not just your actions, because that's what most people think, but also your emotions and your thoughts. Napoleon Hill also mentions how enthusiasm provides energy, but self-control channels it so it doesn't become reckless or destructive. It kind of gives it a channel in a certain direction, again, like a DCA, so you're having it focus in a particular way, and it's not kind of wreaking havoc in your life. Self-control will also help guard you against impulses that are going to harm you on your path. We can think of these as negative emotions, for example, anger, guilt, and shame, and things of this nature. And again, understand you'll always in some way visit these emotions because you are a dualistic being, but it safeguards you from living in these emotions, which again, these impulses and reactions are there, but we can learn to control them and not give in to them so that we can more choose what it is we would rather have. Being in these more negative emotions, rashly moving to them all the time and reacting is what causes a lot of failure or people not getting to their goals. In this chapter, Napoleon Hill also does stress a lot the importance of discipline of your thoughts. Again, going back to that idea of you get what you think about most of the time, so much begins at the level of thought. And so you want to safeguard your mind. You almost want to have a bouncer at the doorway of your mind that only allows in the thoughts that you want to dwell upon and entertain and have more of, and kind of turn away the thoughts you don't really want to entertain. Remember, thoughts are not always created by you. Again, you have certain patterns and things that can create them or give you similar thoughts, but you're also picking up thoughts that are all around you. Go into a room that you know is negatively influenced and tell me you're not getting different thoughts than when you go into a room that's more positively influenced, because you're picking up thoughts as well. And so if you're not safeguarding your mind and any old thought is getting in there, then of course it's going to be very hard to achieve your dreams. Napoleon Hill essentially is talking about how self-control is the steering wheel to success, like we were mentioning. It's that mind element where you're able to point in a direction you want to go and not getting distracted and pointing it in a million different directions that are not serving you. Okay, next principle is the habit of doing more than you've been paid to do. Now, this is not a new one. This is also in the same audio that we get the idea of you get what you think about most of the time, which comes from Earl Nightingale in The Strangest Secret. He talks about how you get value for value. The more value you provide, the more value will have returned, right? It's also kind of like the law of karma. The more that you do something in that direction, the more you're going to receive back, almost like a boomerang. Napoleon Hill mentions how going the extra mile will be of huge benefit. He talks about how you can increase what's called the law of increasing returns, because extra effort attracts unexpected opportunities, goodwill, and rewards that compound over time. In The Strangest Secret by Napoleon Hill, he mentions that this return may not necessarily come from the source in which you have given, right? So maybe you go the extra mile for a certain client or for something and it doesn't come back from them, But again, it will find you in some form, one way or another. Again, some of the obvious ones is this is going to build up reputation and trust. So for example, if you provide a service, if you're a coach or whatever else, other people are going to be ranting and raving about you because, wow, this person is just so valuable. They give so much value when I work with them. Now, like a lot of the other topics that Napoleon Hill gives in this formula, he talks about doing this with the right energy and the right spirit, meaning that service should be given cheerfully and sincerely. Begrudging effort cancels out the benefit. So again, if you're doing this in the same way, like you're trying to generate false enthusiasm, you can't trick the universe. So if you're only putting in that extra mile because you're kind of like, I better get returns, this better work out or whatever else, then you can expect that it won't. But if you are cheerfully doing it, you're kind of getting into the flow of it, you're happily doing it, then you can expect those returns to come in. Again, if you're feeling bad while doing this, then you're just going to be returned things that are going to continually cause you to feel bad. So you don't do this with the expectation that this person you've given it to or whatever you've done will give you something in return that's extra outside of whatever was agreed. But you do know the law that it will be returned in some way, so long as you've done it with a positive attitude and done it cheerfully rather than faking that cheerfulness or giving, again, false enthusiasm. Essentially, think of doing more than you've been paid for as an investment in your future self or your future gains that will come back. You don't know when they'll come back and you don't know in what form, but they will so long as you follow everything we've mentioned in this principle. Okay, next principle is called a pleasing personality. And Napoleon Hill talks about the difference between someone who has a very pleasing personality and someone who doesn't. If you've read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it talks about this principle a lot too, of having a pleasing personality and just how much more goodwill that will generate. Of course, doing that authentically and not doing it from a fake perspective or just to gain, but genuinely developing a pleasing personality. It will develop so much for you. And again, who is the person you want to work with or be around? The one with the pleasing personality, who's joyful, who's enthusiastic, again, genuinely, or the person who's incredibly negative, is kind of in a victim mode all the time, is kind of grumpy and grouchy and you never want to be around them. People want to work with the person who has the pleasing personality, and things just seem to come in for the person who does have that. Hill talks about how personality is 100% a success asset. It is something else you have in your repertoire that provides towards your success. It creates magnetism of character, again, that bring people in rather than repelling them, understanding that first impressions do matter and that sincerity is key. A pleasing personality must be genuine. Attempts to be fake with your charm or warmth are quickly exposed. Think of it like a used car salesman that you know is just coming up to you to be friendly, to be fake. In fact, I have a story about this when I was going to buy a car a long time ago, and I went up to a lot and this person came up to me and like you could tell immediately that something was off, and maybe he had kind of looked at me and went, this person's not going to buy or something like that. And I could feel that energy right away. And because of that, I didn't even want to entertain kind of looking around the lot. I just went, oh, I'm just kind of looking around. And their attitude immediately shifted. They didn't say anything more and just walked away, right? Talk about making sure I don't feel welcome or kind of building me up to want to buy anything there. And the thing is, I was genuinely there to get something. I wasn't just looking around. But because of that attitude, I left that lot, went somewhere else, and bought from someone else who actually did have a pleasing personality. Now that I remember it, I remember that salesman answered all our questions. It seemed incredibly genuine. It was a much better experience, right? And so that's a great example of how having a pleasing personality versus one that is not can really provide you with success. So again, the main takeaway that kind of Napoleon Hill's getting at here is that a pleasing personality is not about being superficial or kind of, again, only doing it when you go to want to gain something, but the actual embodiment of respect, positivity, and sincerity. And this opens the door and inspires cooperation. People want to work with you, people want to do things with you, people want to be around you. Okay, we still have a few more to go here, and this next one is called accurate thinking. So Napoleon Hill talks about how you need to think with precision. It's kind of like we were mentioning earlier about not being distracted. You have the steering wheel pointed in a singular direction, not having it move all of the way around, making sure you're guarding your mind. Now, Hill goes as far as saying that accurate thinking is the foundation of all achievement. It's the ability to separate facts from mere opinions, rumors, or assumptions. He talks about how there are two classes of information: important facts that you can rely on, and number two, unverified information that requires analysis before acceptance. And he doesn't say not to accept it, but just to look into it further before taking it on board. One way I've heard this in more recent times be taught in a really good way is from someone named Thomas Campbell, who is a physicist. He actually had an interview on Know Thyself podcast and the Joe Rogan Experience not that long ago. Really great stuff. You want to check that out. But he talks about how you want to be the open-minded skeptic, not the closed-minded skeptic. The closed-minded skeptic just denies everything that doesn't fit their worldview. The open-minded skeptic is open to things that may go against their current worldview because, of course, we're not going to sit here and say we know it all, but you're doing it from a healthy level of skepticism and making sure you look into it, you try, you test it before passing judgment, right? And so being the open-minded skeptic is what I believe Napoleon Hill is trying to get at here, where it's unverified information, but you believe there might be something to it, so you analyze it before accepting it. So you're open to it, but you want to make sure. You want to just at least do your due diligence when it comes to it. Now, like we mentioned earlier, Napoleon Hill in this chapter talks about guarding your mind. He warns against letting fear, prejudice, or propaganda distort reasoning and distorting the mental faculties of your mind and your thinking capabilities. He also talks about relying on evidence, that successful people discipline themselves to demand proof and weigh sources carefully before forming conclusions. Again, that open-minded skeptic level of thinking. It's not that we deny anything or you were saying we can't have something or whatever else, or consider something, but we're not just going to consider it just for no reason. He also talks about how accurate thinking is going to be crucial for leaders, because when you're a leader, the decision falls upon you. And if you're making choices not based on proven principles, not based on, things and patterns that work, and based on like a clear plan, and you're going all over the place, people will lose confidence in your ability to lead. Next up, we have another big one, which is concentration. Bringing it back to the DCA, Hill talks about having your focus on a singular aim. And this is one a lot of people like to fight, but again, this is what the successful people are doing. And again, I've seen it happen so many times with clients and people I've worked with myself. When they focus on a singular thing and actually concentrate on it, it builds so much energy towards that thing, so much thoughts towards that thing, so much action towards that thing, that it comes in quickly most of the time. And Hill talks about that scattered attention across many pursuits weakens results, like we've talked about. But concentration directs all power towards a definite chief aim. But if you direct concentration and all power towards a definite chief aim, you will notice many different results coming through. He also talks about how success comes faster by mastering one area deeply rather than spreading efforts thin, again, over multiple. If you're trying to spin 10 plates, it becomes very hard to go deep into anything. He also talks about how this conserves mental power by avoiding distractions, negative influences, and aimless activity that will drain your focus. For if you have a singular focus and you're in this moment focusing on that, you can't also at the same time be engaging in all those things that would harm you mentally. He also talks about how this magnetizes opportunities, and just to add some stuff here again, when you have energy and focus going in a particular direction, that energy grows and amplifies quickly, and it creates almost like a magnetic pull with whatever that energy is. So again, when you're focusing on a DCA all of the time, you can think like this big energy ball that's magnetized is forming around that definite chief aim, which brings about opportunities, events, and circumstances that you can then act upon to bring that to fruition. I've seen this work so many different times, and it's why focus and concentration is so important. Napoleon Hill basically says that concentration is the amplifier of success. It gathers scattered forces of the mind into a single beam strong enough to achieve great results. The next one is profiting by failure. Like we mentioned earlier, failure isn't really failure, and as a leader and someone who's taking initiative, you have to be okay with what it is we call failure. But within every so-called failure, there is so much value that we can glean from it, to help us moving forward. Napoleon Hill insists that failure is a teacher, in fact, one of the best, that every setback contains, again, the seed of an equal or greater benefit. And I want to highlight that and say it again, that every failure contains the seed of an equal or greater benefit if one looks for the lesson rather than victimizing themselves because things didn't turn out the way your mind thought they should go. Again, we need to let go of control in those situations. Your mind doesn't have all the information. And so if we can let go of that control and just allow ourselves to embrace the failures, to know, okay, this was something that needed to happen along the way, you will receive an equal or greater benefit. He also mentions how failure is always temporary. It's not permanent. So whatever situation you find yourself in isn't going to be the same later on if you keep applying the success principles. It only becomes a true defeat or failure if you accept it and then kind of give up from that point. He also talks about how failure builds resilience, where you get to learn how to rise after disappointment. It reveals weaknesses because often failures will also expose gaps in your knowledge, maybe your preparation or strategy. Again, it provides very valuable feedback that you can then use to strengthen whatever it is you're doing. And also understanding that failure is the stepping stone to mastery. Every great achievement is preceded by repeated failures that refined both skill and vision. And think about it, failure is plugged into the game of life. When I have a 11-month son, old son right now, and he's trying to learn how to walk, and he falls all of the time. We all went through that. It was programmed into the game that you would do this thing called failure so that you could learn how to succeed, because they're two sides of the same coin. The only reason we feel so bad about failure isn't because it is bad, but because we've given it a negative connotation in the ways we've grown up and what people have told us. It isn't a bad thing. It is a natural part of the process of learning, of growing, and evolving in this life. So we got two more right now. So the second to last one is called tolerance. And Napoleon Hill talks about how intolerance breeds ignorance. He warns against prejudice, hatred, and closed-mindedness that blocks progress, cooperation, and accurate thinking when you have zero tolerance. Again, we go back to the idea of being reactionary. People with very little tolerance tend to be very, very reactionary. He talks about how being open-minded allows you to grow and absorb new ideas. When you have tolerance, new ideas can come in, you can adapt to change, and you can learn from a diverse spectrum of perspectives that you could then possibly bring into what you're doing to enhance it. He also mentions how it's the foundation for peace. On a larger scale, tolerance is essential for harmonious communities, business relations, and international understanding. He said it's linked to leadership because no true leader can inspire loyalty or cooperation if they harbor intolerance towards race, religion, politics, or personal differences. And he also goes over how intolerance wastes a ton of energy. Harboring hate or prejudice drains mental power that could otherwise be directed toward creative achievement. And I'm sure everyone watching this can relate to that in some way. When you've been intolerant or angry or frustrated or whatever else it is, the more you've focused or allowed those emotions to feed at you, the more your energy was drained. And then maybe you didn't want to go do that thing you needed to do for success. Maybe you didn't want to go do that positive habit because you felt so drained from being intolerant in that moment. And the next one is called the Golden Rule. And we've all heard of this one. This is the Golden Rule of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And he calls it the unifying law of all success. Again, we've heard this used biblically. We've heard this used down the ages. And there's a reason it has survived all of that time until today. And again, even if you may be tired of hearing it, oh, that's too simple, like I mentioned in the beginning, it works. And again, like Napoleon Hill says, it is the unifying law of success that brings all of this together. He talks about how the Golden Rule serves as the ultimate guide for conduct in your business relationships, friendships, leadership, again, personal life, ensuring fairness and integrity. It allows for the law of compensation that ties it to the universal principle that actions you put out into the world inevitably return to you for good or for ill. We can also apply this or relate this to the principle of karma. It protects against exploitation by holding every decision up to the Golden Rule. You safeguard yourself from greed, dishonesty, and short-sightedness. And it's a basis of lasting success, not just short-term success, but over time. Hill talks about that no achievement built on exploitation or injustice will endure. Only those aligned with the Golden Rule stand the test of time. Relating this to some other material, if you're familiar with David Hawking's work, Power versus Force, power is long-lasting over time. Force will always break down the moment energy can no longer be put into it. And so again, kind of the key takeaway from this is that the Golden Rule is the crowning law of success. It harmonizes all other principles and ensures the pursuit of wealth and power creates benefit, not harm. Now again, if you want to pick up the full book, obviously there's so much more in between what I just said. We're only scratching the surface, but if you start applying just what we mentioned in this video, you will start noticing differences. Here is, again, the full book if you want to get it yourself. And again, if you want to join a community that's applying these principles where you can get feedback from myself, making sure you're doing what you need to do, then check out my community down below, or you can take a look at my advanced coaching if you're ready for something even deeper. But regardless of that, I would go watch this video next, which is going to synergize amazing with this, what we just covered in this now. We're going to be going over what are called the 7 Hermetic principles, which are going to synergize so well with the principles we just went over today. And learning both of these bodies of work is just going to take your success to the next level if you apply them.